Hey, it's Bjorn from Higher Learning Lab, and in this Photoshop tutorial, I'm going to show you the basics of working with Photoshop gradients. Now, the reason you want to use gradients is because they make things look more natural. In nature, there's rarely a color that is totally flat, and if there is one, it really stands out to the eye. Almost everything, if you look closely, has a gradient, and so gradients are used to make your graphics more visually appealing and look more natural. And gradients are actually made quite easy, and we're going to do them right now. We're just going to open a new document inside Photoshop, use the settings we already have, and now we have a big white blank page. And if we go over to the tool set, we by default have a paint bucket. If you click and hold on that paint bucket, there is a gradient tool. Now this gradient tool can be used to make gradients, and there's some settings up at the top here. The colors that you see are the colors that are selected in your palette currently and the gradient between them. So here we have blue in the palette and white in the palette, and that's what we have up here. We have a blue to white gradient. So if we change this white by clicking on it, change it to red, click OK, now our gradient here is blue to red. And if we click this drop down arrow, we can select a bunch of pre-made ones. The very first one is the one that we have. A lot of the others are pre-made, but they include your foreground color. So we have your foreground color, which in our case is blue to transparent. Here we have blue with some stripes, and all the ones in between, those are just custom made, and they're not affected by your foreground color. And by default, we have a linear gradient selected, which looks, I'm just going to draw one right now. Our linear gradient looks like this. Very nice. Now I'm just going to make a new layer. Oh, wrong button, make a new layer. I'm going to select the radial gradient and make one of those so you see what they look like. Radial gradients are radial. They are a circle from inside, your foreground color is on the inside, and the color transitions out to your background color on the outside. And we also have an angle gradient. I'm going to click on that, make a new layer, and we'll see what that looks like. I'm going to hide these two. And this is our angle gradient. I'm just going to redo that, make it a little more clear. Now the angle gradient, I don't quite know how to describe it. However, we have a very sharp transition between the two colors here, and then they fan out here and they make a gradient at the back end. And so that's the angle gradient. And then we also have the option of a reflected gradient. I'm going to make a new layer. And reflected means we have the gradient on both sides. So the foreground color is in the middle wherever you click your cursor first, and then you drag it out, and then on the top and the bottom we transition to the background color. And the last gradient we're going to have, the last gradient that's preset, we have the diamond gradient. I'm going to make a new layer. And the diamond gradient makes a diamond of the foreground color in the center. And then we can change the mode. We're not going to get into all these modes. Most of the time you're just going to run it on normal. You can change the opacity, which is the opacity of the gradient when you make it. So if we make a new gradient or new layer with opacity of 48%, we see it's much lighter than the one that was at 100, which is this one. And then you can reverse the gradient, so whatever you have here, so this one for the radial gradient, it was foreground color in the middle and then background color outside. And if we reverse it, it's going to be background color in the middle and foreground color on the outside. Now another thing you can do is add gradients to objects. So if we go over here to create a shape, I'm just going to choose the ellipse tool. Just going to draw an ellipse, move it to the middle, and I'm going to hold the command key and then click on the image in the layer on the right hand side. If you're on Windows, hold the control key, and it selects the outline of that image or of that shape. And then you can choose the gradient, and choose a different one, this one. And if we make a gradient inside of, we have to make a new layer because this layer is not rasterized. We have to make a new layer. That selection stays on the new layer. We click and drag the gradient, and it makes a gradient that stays within that outline. So you can actually create any selection that you want. We can create just a random shape like that. Make a new layer, and we can apply a gradient, and it stays within that shape, like so. Another cool thing you can do, you create a shape. I'm going to create a rectangle, and if we double click on the layer on any part that's doesn't have writing or doesn't have the shape, it will open the layer style options. You can also get to that through the menu. If we go to the layer menu, layer style, we open the blending options, opens that same window, and there is in here a gradient overlay. If we check that box and then click on that item, it opens a new menu, and it overlays a gradient on the object. We see this gradient was just applied. If we uncheck it, it goes back to what it was originally, which is blue. Check it again, it has that black to white gradient applied. And we have the same options here for the gradient. We have the blend mode, opacity, whether it's linear, radial, angled, reflected, or diamond. I'm just going to keep it as it is here. Click on OK. Now this gradient is applied as a layer style. And the cool thing with layer styles is if you right click, you can actually copy the layer style. So if I wanted this object, this orange and yellow ellipse, to have the black and white gradient that I created for a different object, I can right click on it, click on paste layer style, and now it takes that same layer style and applies it to that object. You can also drag and drop layer styles. So say we don't want it on the rectangle anymore, we click and hold on the word effects, drag it to the layer we want, and then we have it applied to the other layer. And the first layer that we took it from is back to normal. And that's really all there is to know about gradients. You pick two different colors, you select the type of gradient, and then unfortunately you spend the rest of the time monkeying around with it until you get the exact gradient design and look that you want. It's not an exact science. With experience you get better and better, and there's less monkeying around. But when you're learning, you just try all these things and you see what works best, and you keep refining your skills. And then when you start incorporating layer styles, you can much more easily apply those styles to other layers. Say you want to apply the gradient to multiple layers, you can do it quickly and easily with the layer styles without worrying about having to do it the exact same way every single time. So I hope this video helps you. My name is Bjorn Allpass from Higher Learning Lab. Please make sure you like this video, share it on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out HigherLearningLab.com, where we write about everything tech every single day. Talk to you soon.